Good evening, everyone. I hope you're having an absolutely wonderful Halloween. So far, so good here at the Sylvie household. I, of course, am Bill Sylvie, aka the Dungeon Delver, coming to you live on All Hallows Eve. And I hope everything is just going along swimmingly. Hello, Paint Minis Live and Robert Phillips and Kennick. Good to see you. If you're watching us over on Twitter, please give us a shout. I do love my friends over on Twitter, but sometimes I miss your comments. So give us a yell in the comments section, or you can drop a comment under the video as it goes. I may miss that, but I hope not. But anyway, I hope everyone has their bags full of candy, your popcorn balls, your candied apples that I'm sure everyone in the neighborhood has made and given out. I remember when I was a kid and we went trick-or-treating for the first time out of our immediate neighborhood when I was young. We stopped by some houses that I didn't know. We were a few streets over, a few blocks over with the betting fields, and they went to hey, 33K7 there. See, there you go. Shout out from folks over on Twitter. And the Bedingfield brothers, Jimmy and Philip, and we stopped by like their little league coach, and I am not making this up. I am not making this up. He was giving out grilled hot dogs in a bun, wrapped in foil. That was what he was giving out for Halloween. And of course, I mean, the thing was stone cold by the time I got home, right? And but I wanted it. I wanted. He had put a run of ketchup down it too, and it was completely inedible. My mom and dad were quite insistent that I not have it. Did I give out candy? No, I did not give out candy canes. Oh, you're talking to Daniel Rowan. Sorry. But anyway, let's see. But this year, my eldest wanted to watch a movie with a friend. I think they're going to do that later. They're going to stream it on Discord, and both of them watch it together. And my youngest went to her boyfriend's house tonight. So for the first time in 20 years, I think, not counting human malware, the year of human malware, that is, I had no particular Halloween plans. I did not walk around the neighborhood regretting every step I took in my loafers because I was once again not smart enough to put on my sneakers, which are much more comfortable. I didn't have to carry a soft ice pack to apply to foreheads. Many of you might have gone trick-or-treating tonight or dealt with trick-or-treaters. Maybe there's a light dusting of snow. Maybe you're expecting some hoar frost on the grounds tonight. But here in Florida, mid-80s today, upper 70s tonight. So, with rare exception, I think 2021, possibly 2022, we actually had a couple of cool breezes on Halloween Eve. I remember one year, some of the families on the block had given out beers and wine pops and Jello shots to parents. I got a wine pop one year, and I was so glad to have it because poor Rosie was melting down, and I was like, yeah, hey, I'll take one of those. And as soon as we got up the block a little bit, I crunched it up and put it on her neck, and she was She was so happy. She was so happy. And I threw it in the freezer and it sat for the longest time. And then I was like, this is green apple flavored. I'm going to try this. And it had maybe a tablespoon of wine in it, just enough to give it a little bit of uh, that alcohol flavor, I guess. 80 in Southern Jersey. Yep, I can believe it. I can believe it. Got my horror story today already. I checked out the NOAA website, and there are three, well, that might do something to Florida. There are two areas of interest, as they call them. So we'll have to see. Might have to go through this whole thing again. But anyway, let me ask you a favor. This would be a fun treat for me, if you would. If you haven't already, and you like varied content, classic tabletop RPG material, perhaps, live plays, interesting guests, and the occasional diversion like tonight, if you would be so kind, please do click the subscribe button and the bell icon for notifications. That would be fantastic. And I would love it if you could do that. No, I don't think I will, David. I appreciate that. You guys, there's stories from the DMV, etc. No, it's nothing like that. And people were asking me over on Twitter when I first said that I was going to do that, when I first mentioned it on social media, what I was going to do. They were like, is it HP Lovecraft? 3 or 4 people asked me if it was HPL, and it's not HPL. It is someone I have mentioned his works before. It's not Poe, it's not King, it's not Kuntz, it's not probably most of you, many of you. I don't know. I have a pretty smart and literate crowd. Many of you might not know these works, and some of you may. So with that said, I'm going to mention something else. This may come as a surprise to many of you. This may come as a huge shock to some of you. I am not a professional voice actor. I've had some people say very complimentary things about my voice. I do not think I have a good voice. With that said, I shall do my level best because these are good stories and I want to share them with you. Hello, Recon. Good to see you. With that said, now we will pull back the curtain. Both stories tonight are by William Fryer Harvey. He wrote these at the turn of the century, the previous century. So these clock a little north of 110 years. And I hope they make your skin crawl. The first one is much shorter than the second one. So I will start with it, and hopefully this will whet your appetite. And if I see the view numbers just absolutely tank, then I know it wasn't for you. I am going to do one thing. I'm going to turn off the one of my 4 lights in the room. I have 3 of my studio lights on. I'm going to turn off one of them, so then I will only have 2 up. So give me a moment. Robert Phillips wants me to use my James Mason voice. No, I don't think I'm going to do that for this. Unless somebody wants to throw me a huge super. And while it's not exactly a witch's hat, I think a wizard's hat will do the trick. David Brown, my throat would not survive the attempt. The Sleeth voice, $10,000. Yeah, that would have to be the super. Okay. So the first story is titled August Heat by William Fryer Harvey. The story was written in 1910. Fenistone Road, Clapham, August 29th. I have had what I believe to be the most remarkable day in my life, and while the events are still fresh in my mind, I wish to put them down on paper as clearly as possible. Let me say at the outset that my name is James Clarence Withencroft. I am 40 years old, in perfect health, never having known a day's illness. By profession, I am an artist. Not a very successful one, but I earn enough money by my black and white work to satisfy my necessary wants. My only near relative, a sister, died 5 years ago, so that I am independent. I breakfasted this morning at 9, and after glancing through the morning paper, I lighted my pipe and proceeded to let my mind wander in the hope that I might chance upon some subject for my pencil. Hello, Joanna. Thank you for joining us. The room, though door and windows were open, was oppressively hot, and I had just made up my mind that the coolest and most comfortable place in the neighborhood would be the deep end of the public swimming bath when the idea came. I began to draw. So intent was I on my work that I left my lunch untouched, only stopping work when the clock of St. Jude struck 4. The final result for a hurried sketch was, I felt sure, the best thing I had done. It showed a criminal in the dock immediately after the judge had pronounced sentence. The man was fat, enormously fat. The flesh hung in rolls about his chin. It creased his huge, stumpy neck. He was clean shaven. Perhaps I should say a few days before he must have been clean shaven, and almost bald. He stood in the dock, his short, clumsy fingers clasping the rail, looking straight in front of him. The feeling of that his expression conveyed was not so much one of horror as utter, absolute collapse. There seemed nothing in the man strong enough to sustain that mountain of flesh. I rolled up the sketch and, without quite knowing why, placed it in my pocket. Then, with a rare sense of happiness which the knowledge of a good thing well done gives, I left the house. I believe that I set out with the idea of calling upon Trenton, for I remember walking along Lytton Street and turning to the right along Gilchrist Road at the bottom of the hill where the men were at work on the new tram lines. From there onward, I have only the vaguest recollection of where I went. The one thing of which I was fully conscious was the awful heat. That came up from the dusty asphalt pavement as an almost palpable wave. I longed for the thunder promised by the great banks of copper-colored cloud that hung low over the western sky. I must have walked 5 or 6 miles when a small boy roused me from my reverie by asking the time. It was 20 minutes to 7. When he left me, I began to take stock of my bearings. I found myself standing before a gate that led into a yard bordered by a strip of thirsty earth, where there were flowers, purple stock and scarlet geranium. Above the entrance was a board with the inscription, Charles Atkinson, monumental mason, worker in English and Italian marbles. From the yard itself came a cheery whistle, the noise of hammer blows, and the cold sound of steel meeting stone. A sudden impulse made me enter. A man was sitting with his back towards me, busy at his work on a slab of curiously veined marble. He turned round as he heard my steps, and I stopped short. It was the man I had been drawing, whose portrait lay in my pocket. He sat there, huge and elephantine, the sweat pouring from his scalp, which he wiped with a red silk handkerchief. But though the face was the same, the expression was absolutely different. He greeted me smiling, as if we were old friends, and shook my hand. I apologized for my intrusion. Everything is hot and glary outside, I said. This seems an oasis in the wilderness. I don't know about the oasis, he replied, but it's certainly hot, hot as hell. Take a seat, sir. He pointed to the end of a gravestone on which he was at work, and I sat down. That's a beautiful piece of stone you've got hold of, I said. He shook his head. In a way it is, he answered. The surface here is as fine as anything you could wish, but there's a big flaw at the back, though I don't expect you'd ever notice it. I could never make a really good job of a bit of marble like that. It would be all right in the summer like this. It wouldn't mind the blasted heat. But wait until the winter comes. There's nothing quite like frost to find out the weak points in stone. Then what's it for? I asked. The man burst out laughing. You'd hardly believe me if I was to tell you it's for an exhibition, but it's the truth. Artists have exhibition, so do grocers and butchers. We have them too. All the latest little things in headstones, you know. He went on to talk of marbles, which sort best withstood the wind and rain, and which were the easiest to work with. Then of his garden and a new sort of carnation he had bought. At the end of every other minute, he would drop his tools, wipe his shining head, and curse the heat. I said little, for I felt uneasy. There was something unnatural, uncanny in meeting this man. I tried at first to persuade myself that I had seen him before, that his face, unknown to me, had found a place in some out-of-the-way corner of my memory, but I knew that I was practicing little more than a plausible piece of self-deception. Mr. Atkinson finished his work, spat on the ground, and got up with a sigh of relief. There, what do you think of that? He said, with an air of evident pride. The inscription, which I read for the first time, was this: Sacred to the memory of James Clarence Whittencroft, born January 18th, 1860. He passed away very suddenly on August 20th. In the midst of life, we are in death. Send me the link again, David. Send me the link again to Graveyard Dogs. For some time, I sat in silence. Then a cold shudder ran down my spine. I asked him where he'd seen the name. Oh, I didn't see it anywhere, replied Mr. Atkinson. I wanted some name, and I put down the first that came into my head. Why do you want to know? It's a strange coincidence, but it happens to be mine. He gave a long, low whistle. And the dates? I can only answer for one of them, and that's correct. It's a rum go, he said. But he knew less than I did. I told him of my morning's work. I took the sketch from my pocket and showed it to him. As he looked, the expression of his face altered until it became more and more like that of the man I had drawn. And it was only the day before yesterday, he said, that I told Maria there was no such thing as ghosts. Neither of us had seen a ghost, but I knew what he meant. You probably heard my name, I said. And you must have seen me somewhere and have forgotten it. Were you at Clacton-on-Sea last July? I'd never been to Clacton in my life. We were silent for some time. We were both looking at the same thing, the two dates on the gravestone, and one was right. Come inside and have some supper, said Mr. Atkinson. His wife is a cheery little woman with the flaky red cheeks of the country bred. Her husband introduced me as a friend of his who was an artist. The result was unfortunate, for after the sardines and watercress had been removed, she brought out a Doré Bible, and I had to sit and express my admiration for nearly half an hour. I went outside and found Atkinson sitting on this gravestone smoking. We resumed our conversation at the point we had left off. You must excuse my asking, I said, but do you know of anything you've done for which you could be put on trial? He shook his head. I'm not a bankrupt. The business is prosperous enough. 3 years ago, I gave turkeys to some of the guardians at Christmas, but that's all I can think of. And they were small ones, too, he added as an afterthought. He got up, fetched a can from the porch, and began to water the flowers. Twice a day regular in the hot weather, he said. And then the heat sometimes gets the better of the delicate ones. And ferns, good Lord, they could never stand it. Where do you live? I told him my address. It would take an hour's quick walk to get back home. It's like this, he said. We'll look at the matter straight. If you go back home tonight, you take your chance of accidents. A cart may run you ever, and there's always banana skins and orange peel, to say nothing of fallen ladders. He spoke with the improbable of an intense seriousness that would have been laughable 6 hours before, but I did not laugh. The best thing we can do, he continued, is for you to stay here till 12 o'clock. We'll go upstairs and smoke. It may be cooler inside. To my surprise, I agreed. We are sitting now in a long, low room beneath the eaves. Atkinson has sent his wife to bed. He himself is busy sharpening some tools at a little oil stone, smoking one of my cigars all the while. The air seems charged with thunder. I'm writing this at a shaky table before the open windows. The leg is cracked, and Atkinson, who seems a handy man with his tools, is going to mend it as soon as he is finished, putting a sharp edge on his chisel. It is after 11 now. I shall be gone in less than an hour. But the heat is stifling. It's enough to send a man mad. What did you guys think? I'm going to answer some questions in the chat. Hopefully you guys liked the story and the reading, but the story more than the reading. I'll share the link real quick also if anyone would care to read it. Let's see. Yes, Joanna, hello. Not your Echo is dressed as a dwarven magic user. Oh, you. What is a Ron super chat? She flung down. I think I'm not sure. I mean, I know what a super chat is. That's, you guys drop a little something in the soup can there. I think maybe it is. She flung, could be. David Brown, Graveyard Dogs. Hang on a second. I see your link here. But I would like to know everyone's thoughts on the story. I don't know what the exchange rate is for whatever that currency is. She flung. I sure don't. All right, so I have David Brown's story queued up. We are going to jump into the next one. Thank you, She flung. That's what I was after. Now this one's a little bit longer. This is also by W.F. Harvey. This is titled "The Beast with Five Fingers." 33K7, 7 out of 10. Well, tell me what you liked and what you disliked, and we'll look in on it between now and the next story. The Beast with Five Fingers by W.F. Harvey. This is from 1919, so this clocks in a decade after August Heat. And once again, when I'm done, I will share the link with you guys. Or would you like it now? If you'd like the link now, just say so, and I'll paste it up. When I was a little boy, I once went with my father to call on Adrian Borles over. I played on the floor with a black spaniel while my father appealed for a subscription. Just before he left, my father said, "Mr. Borelsover, may my son here shake hands with you. It will be a thing to look back upon with pride when he grows to be a man." I came up to the bed on which the old man was lying and put my hand in his, awed by the still beauty of his face. He spoke to me kindly, and I hoped that I should always try to please my father. Then he placed his right hand on my head and asked for a blessing to rest upon me. "Amen," said my father, and I followed him out of the room, feeling as if I wanted to cry. But my father was in excellent spirits. I will send that link. There is the link. She flung, if I did that, I would lose my YouTube channel. "That old gentleman, Jim," said he, "is the most wonderful man in the whole town. For 10 years he has been quite blind." "But I saw his eyes," I said. "They were ever so black and shiny. They weren't shut up like Nora's puppies. Can't he see it all?" And so I learnt for the first time that a man might have eyes that look dark and beautiful and shiny without being able to see. "Just like Mrs. Tomlinson has big ears," I said, "and can't hear at all except when Mr. Tomlinson shouts." "Jim," said my father, "it's not right to talk about a lady's ears. Remember what Mr. Borelsover said about pleasing me and being a good boy." That was the only time I ever saw Adrian Borelsover. I soon forgot about him and the hand which he laid in blessing on my head, but for a week I prayed that those dark, tender eyes might see. "His spaniel may have puppies," I said in my prayer, "and he will never be able to know how funny they look with their eyes all closed up. Please let old Mr. Borelsover see." Adrian Borelsover, as my father had said, was a wonderful man. He came of an eccentric family. Borelsover's sons, for some reason, always seemed to marry very ordinary women, perhaps which accounted for the fact that no Borelsover had been a genius and only one Borelsover had been mad. But they were great champions of little causes, generous patrons of odd sciences, founders of querulous sects, trustworthy guides to the bypath meadows of erudition. Adrian was an authority on the fertilization of orchids. He had held at one time the family living Borelsover Conyers until a congenital weakness of the lungs obliged him to seek a less rigorous climate in the sunny south coast watering place where I had seen him. Occasionally he would relieve one of the other local clergy. My father described him as a fine preacher who gave long and inspiring sermons from what many men would have considered unprofitable texts. "An excellent proof," he would add, "of the truth of the doctrine of direct verbal inspiration." Adrian Borelsover was exceedingly clever with his hands. His penmanship was quite exquisite. He illustrated all of his scientific papers, made his own woodcuts, and carved the retiros that is at present the chief feature of interest in the church at Borelsover Conyers. He has an exceedingly clever knack in cutting silhouettes for young ladies and paper pigs and cows for little children, and made more than one complicated wind instrument of his own devising. When he was 50 years old, Adrian Borelsover lost his sight. In a wonderfully short time, he had adapted himself to the new conditions of life. He quickly learned to read Braille. So marvelous indeed was his sense of touch that he was still able to maintain an interest in botany. The mere passing of his long, supple fingers over a flower was sufficient means for its identification, though occasionally he would use his lips. I have found several letters of his amongst my father's correspondence. In no case was there anything to show that he was afflicted with blindness, and this in spite of the fact that he exercised undue economy in the spacing of lines. Towards the close of his life, the old man was credited with the powers of touch that seemed almost uncanny. It has been said that he could tell a story of the color of ribbon placed between his fingers. My father would neither confirm nor deny that. Chapter 1. Adrian Borlsover was a bachelor. His older brother George had married late in life, leaving one son, Eustace, who lived in the gloomy Georgian mansions at Borlover Conyers, where he could work undisturbed in collecting material for his great book on heredity. Like his uncle, he was a remarkable man. The Borlsovers had been born naturalists, but Eustace possessed in a special degree the power of systemizing his knowledge. He had received his university education in Germany and then, after postgraduate work in Vienna and Naples, had traveled for 4 years in South America and the East, getting together a huge store of material for a new study into the process of variation. He lived alone at Borlsover Conyers with Saunders, his secretary, a man who bore a somewhat dubious reputation in the district, but whose powers as a mathematician, combined with his business abilities, were invaluable to Eustace. Uncle and nephew saw little of each other. The visits of Eustace were confined to a week in the summer or autumn, long weeks that dragged almost as slowly as the bath chair in which the old man was drawn along the sunny seafront. In their way, the two men were fond of each other, though their intimacy would doubtlessly have been greater had they shared the same religious views. Adrian held to the old-fashioned evangelical dogmas of his early manhood. His nephew for many years had been thinking of embracing Buddhism. Both men possessed, too, the reticence of the Borlsovers had always shown, and which their enemies sometimes called hypocrisy. With Adrian, it was a reticence as to the things he had left undone, but with Eustace, it seemed that the curtain which he was so careful to leave undrawn hid something more than a half-empty chamber. 2 years before his death, Adrian Borlsover developed, unknown to himself, the not uncommon power of automatic writing. Eustace made the discovery by accident. Adrian was sitting reading in bed, the forefinger of his left hand tracing the Braille characters, when his nephew noticed that a pencil the old man held in his right hand was moving slowly along the opposite page. He left his seat in the window and sat down beside the bed. The right hand continued to move, and now he could plainly see that there were letters and words which it was forming. Adrian Borlsover, wrote the hand. Eustace Borlsover. George Borlsover, Francis Borlsover, Sigismund Borlsover, Adrian Borlsover, Eustace Borlsover, Seville Borlsover, B for Borlsover. Honesty is the best policy. Beautiful Belinda Borlsover. What curious nonsense, Eustace said to himself. King George III ascended the throne in 1760, wrote the hand. Crowd, a noun of multitude, a collection of individuals. Adrian Borlsover, Eustace Borlsover. It seems to me, said his uncle, closing the book, that you had much better make the most of the afternoon sunshine and take your walk now. I think perhaps I will, Eustace answered after he picked up the volume. I won't go far, and when I come back I can read to you those articles in Nature about which we were speaking. He went along the promenade, but stopped at the first shelter, and seating himself in the corner best protected from the wind, he examined the books at leisure. Nearly every page was scored with a meaningless jungle of pencil marks, rows of capital letters, short words, long words, complete sentences, book copy tags. The whole thing, in fact, had the appearance of a copybook, and on a more careful scrutiny, Eustace thought that there was ample evidence to show that the handwriting at the beginning of the book, good though it was not nearly so good as the handwriting at the end. He left his uncle at the end of October with a promise to return in early December. It seemed to him quite clear that the old man's power of automatic writing was developing rapidly, and for the first time he looked forward to a visit that combined duty with interest. But on his return, he was at first disappointed. His uncle, he thought, looked older. He was listless, too, preferring others read to him and dictating nearly all his letters. Not until the day before he left had Eustace an opportunity of observing Adrian Borlsover's newfound faculty. The old man, propped up in a bed with pillows, had sunk into a light sleep. His two hands lay on the coverlet, his left hand tightly clasping his right. Eustace took an empty manuscript book and placed a pencil within reach of the fingers of the right hand. They snatched at it eagerly, then dropped the pencil to unloose the left hand from its restraining grasp. Perhaps to prevent interference, I had better hold that hand, said Eustace to himself as he watched the pencil. Almost immediately it began to write. Blundering Borlsovers, unnecessarily unnatural, extraordinarily eccentric, culpably curious. Who are you? Said Eustace in a low voice. Never you mind, wrote the hand of Adrian. Is it my uncle who's writing? Oh, my prophetic soul, mine uncle. Is it anyone I know? Silly Eustace, you'll see me very soon. When shall I see you? When poor old Adrian's dead. Where shall I see you? Where shall you not? Instead of speaking his next question, Borlsover wrote it. What is the time? The fingers dropped the pencil and moved 3 or 4 times across the paper. Then picking up the pencil, they wrote, 10 minutes before 4. Put your book away, Eustace. Adrian mustn't find us working at this sort of thing. He doesn't know what to make of it, and I won't have poor Adrian disturbed. Au revoir. Adrian Borlsover woke with a start. I've been dreaming again, he said. Such queer dreams of leaguered cities and forgotten towns. You were mixed up in this one, Eustace, though I can't remember how. Eustace, I want to warn you, don't walk in doubtful paths. Choose your friends well. Your poor grandfather. A fit of coughing put an end to what he was saying, but Eustace saw that the hand was still writing. He managed unnoticed to draw the book away. I'll light the gas, he said, and ring for tea. On the other side of the bed curtain, he saw the last sentence that had been written. It's too late, Adrian, he read. We're friends already, aren't we, Eustace Borlsover? On the following day, Eustace Borlsover left. He thought his uncle looked ill when he said goodbye, and the old man spoke despondently of the failure his life had been. Nonsense, uncle, said his nephew. You've got over your difficulties in a way not 1 in 100,000 would have done. Everyone marvels at your splendid perseverance in teaching your hand to take the place of your lost sight. To me, it's been a revelation of the possibilities of education. Education, said his uncle dreamily, as if the word had started a new train of thought. Education is good for as long as you know for whom and for what purpose you give it. But with the lower orders of men, the base and more sordid spirits, and grave doubts as to its results. Well, goodbye, Eustace. I may not see you again. You're a true Borlsover with all the Borlsover faults. Marry, Eustace, marry some good, sensible girl. And if by chance I don't see you again, my will is at my solicitor's. I'm not left you any legacy because I know you're well provided for, but I thought you might like to have my books. Oh, and there's just one other thing. You know, before the end, people often lose control of themselves and make absurd requests. Don't pay attention to them, Eustace. Goodbye. And he held out his hand. Eustace took it. It remained in his a fraction of a second longer than he had expected and gripped him with a virility that was surprising. There was, too, in its touch, a subtle sense of intimacy. Why, uncle, I shall see you alive and well for many years to come. 2 months later, Adrian Borlsover died. Chapter 2. Eustace Borlsover was in Naples at the time. He read the obituary notice in Morning Post on the day announced for the funeral. Poor old fellow, he said. I wonder where I shall find room for all his books. The question occurred to him with greater force than when 3 days later he found himself standing in the library at Borlsover Conyers, a huge room built for use and not for beauty, in the year of Waterloo by a Borlsover who was an ardent admirer of the great Napoleon. It was arranged on the plan of many college libraries, with tall projecting bookcases forming deep recesses of dusty silence, fit graves for the old hates of forgotten controversy, the dead passions of forgotten lives. At the end of the room, behind the bust of some unknown 18th century divine, an ugly iron corkscrew stair led to a shelf-lined gallery. Nearly every shelf was full. "I must talk to Saunders about it," said Eustace. "I suppose it will be necessary to have the billiard room fitted up with bookcases." The two men met for the first time after many weeks in the dining room that evening. "Hello," said Eustace, standing before the fire with his hands in his pockets. "How goes the world, Saunders? Why these dress togs?" He himself was wearing an old shooting jacket. He did not believe in mourning, and had told his uncle on his last visit. And though he usually went for quiet colored ties, he wore this evening one of an ugly red in order to shock Morton the butler and to make them thrash out the whole question of mourning for themselves in the servants' hall. Eustace was a true Borlsover. "The world," said Saunders, "goes the same as usual, confoundedly slow. The dress togs are accounted for by an invitation from Captain Lockwood to bridge." "How are you getting there?" "I've told your coachman to drive me in your carriage. Any objection?" "Oh, dear me, no. We've had all things in common for far too many years for me to raise objections at this hour of day." "You'll find your correspondence in the library," went on Saunders. "Most of it I've seen. There are a few private letters I haven't opened. There's also a box with a rat or something inside it that came by the evening post. Very likely it's a six-toed albino. I didn't look because I didn't want to mess up my things, but I should gather from the way it's jumping about that it's pretty hungry." "Oh, I'll see to it," said Eustace, "while you and the captain earn an honest penny." Dinner over and Saunders gone, Eustace went into the library. Though the fire had been lit, the room was by no means cheerful. "We'll have all the lights on at any rate," he said, and turned the switches. "And Morton," he added when the butler brought coffee, "get me a screwdriver or something to undo this box. Whatever the animal is, he's kicking up a deuce of a row. What is it? Why are you dawdling?" "If you please, sir, when the postman's brought it, he told me that they bored holes in the lid at the post office. There was no breathing holes in the lid, sir, and they didn't want the animal to die. That is all, sir." "It's culpably careless of the man, whoever he was," said Eustace as he removed the screws. "Packing an animal like this in a wooden box with no means of getting air. Confound it all. I meant to ask Morton to bring me a cage to put it in. Now I suppose I shall have to get one myself." He placed a heavy book on the lid from which the screws had been removed and went into the billiard room. As he came back into the library with an empty cage in hand, he heard the sound of something falling and then of something scuttling along the floor. "Bother it. The beast got out. How in the world am I to find it in this library?" To search for it did indeed seem hopeless. He tried to follow the sound of the scuttling in one of the recesses where the animal seemed to be running behind the books in the very shelves, but it was impossible to locate it. Eustace resolved to go on quietly reading. Very likely the animal might gain confidence and show itself. Saunders seemed to have dealt in his usual methodical manner with the most of the correspondence. There were still the private letters. What was that? Two sharp clicks, and the lights in the hideous candelabra that hung from the ceiling suddenly went out. "I wonder if something's gone wrong with the fuse," said Eustace as he went to the switches by the door. Then he stopped. There was a noise at the end of the room, as if something was crawling up the iron corkscrew stair. "If it's gone into the gallery," he said, "well and good." He hastily turned on the lights, crossed the room, and climbed up the stair. But he could see nothing. His grandfather had placed a little gate at the top of the stairs so that children could run and romp in the gallery without fear of accident. This Eustace closed, and having considerably narrowed the circle of his search, returned to his desk by the fire. How gloomy the library was! There was no sense of intimacy about the room. The few busts that an 18th century Borlsover had brought back from the grand tour might have been in keeping in the old library. Here they seemed out of place. They made the room feel cold in spite of the heavy red damask curtains and gilt green cornices. With a crash, two heavy books fell from the gallery to the floor. Then, as Borlsover looked, another and yet another. "Very well, you'll starve for this, my beauty," he said. "We'll do some little experiments on the metabolism of rats deprived of water. Go on, chuck them down. I think I've got the upper hand." He turned once again to his correspondence. The letter was from the family solicitor. It spoke of his uncle's death and the valuable collection of books that had been left to him in the will. There was one request, he read, which certainly came as a surprise to me. As you know, Mr. Adrian Borlsover left it at his instructions that his body was to be buried in as simple a manner as possible at Eastbourne. He expressed a desire that there should be neither wreaths nor flowers of any kind, and hoped that his friends and relatives would not consider it necessary to wear mourning. The day before his death, we received a letter canceling these instructions. He wished his body to be embalmed. He gave us the address of a man whom we were to employ, Pennifer at Ludgate Hill, with the orders that his right hand be sent to you, stating that it was at your special request. The other arrangements to the funeral were to remain unaltered. Good Lord, said Eustace. What in the world was the old boy driving at? And why in the name of all that's holy is that? Someone was in the gallery. Someone had pulled the cord attached to one of the blinds, and it had rolled up with a snap. Someone must be in the gallery, for a second blind did the same. Someone must be walking around the gallery, for one after the other the blind sprang up, letting in the moonlight. I haven't got to the bottom of this yet, said Eustace, but I will do right before the night is very much older. And he hurried up the corkscrew stair. He had just got to the top when the lights went out a second time. He heard the scuttling across the floor. Quickly he stole on tiptoe in the dim moonshine to the direction of the noise, feeling as he went for one of the switches. His fingers touched the metal knob at last. He turned on the electric light. About 10 yards in front of him, crawling along the floor, was a man's hand. Eustace stared at it in utter astonishment. It was moving quickly in the manner of a geometer caterpillar. The fingers humped up at one moment, flattened the next. The thumb appeared to give a crab-like motion to the whole. While he was looking, too surprised to stir, the hand disappeared round the corner. Eustace ran forward. He no longer saw it, but he could hear it as it squeezed its way behind the books on one of the shelves. A heavy volume had been displaced. There was a gap in the row of books where it had got in. In his fear, lest it should escape him again, he seized the first book that came to his hand and plugged it into the hole. Then, emptying 2 shelves of their contents, he took the wooden boards and propped them up in front to make his barrier doubly sure. I wish Saunders was back, he said. One can't tackle this sort of thing alone. It was after 11, and there seemed little likelihood of Saunders returning before 12. He did not dare to leave the shelf unwatched, even to run downstairs to ring the bell. Morton the butler often used to come round about 11 to see that the windows were fastened, but he might not come. Eustace was thoroughly unstrung. At last he heard the steps down below. Morton! He shouted. Morton! Sir? Has Mr. Saunders got back yet? Not yet, sir. Well, bring me some brandy and hurry up about it. I'm up here in the gallery, you duffer. Thanks, said Eustace as he emptied the glass. Don't go to bed yet, Morton. There are a lot of books that have fallen down by accident. Bring them up and put them back in their shelves. Morton had never seen Borlsover in so talkative a mood as on that night. Here, said Eustace when the books had been put back and dusted. You might hold up these boards for me, Morton. The beast in the box got out, and I've been chasing it all over the place. I think I can hear it chawing at the books, sir. They're not valuable, I hope. I think that's the carriage, sir. I shall go and call Mr. Saunders. I hope everyone's enjoying. It seems to Eustace that he was away for 5 minutes, but it could hardly have been more than 1 when he returned with Saunders. All right, Morton, you can go now. I'm up here, Saunders. What's all the row? Asked Saunders as he lounged forward with his hands in his pockets. The luck had been with him all the evening. He was completely satisfied both with himself and with Captain Lockwood's taste in wines. What's the matter? You look to me to be in an absolute blue funk. That old devil of an uncle of mine, began Eustace. Oh, I can't explain it all. It's his hand that's been playing old Harry all evening. but I've got it cornered behind these books. You've got to help me catch it. What's up with you, Eustace? What's the game? It's no game, you silly idiot. If you don't believe me, take out one of those books and put your hand in and feel. All right, said Saunders, but I'll wait till I've rolled up my sleeve. The accumulated dust of centuries, eh? He took off his coat, knelt down, and thrust his arm along the shelf. There's something there, right enough. It's got a funny stumpy end to it, whatever it is, and nips like a crab. Ah, no, you don't. He pulled his hand out in a flash. Shove in a book quickly. Now it can't get out. What was it? Asked Eustace. It was something that wanted very much to get a hold of me. I felt what seemed like a thumb and a forefinger. Give me some brandy. How are we going to get it out of there? What about a landing net? No good. I think it would be too smart for us. I tell you, Saunders, it can cover the ground far faster than I can walk, but I think I see how we can manage it. The two books at the end of the shelf are big ones that go right back against the wall. The others are very thin. I'll take one out at a time, and you slide the rest along the wall until we've squashed it between the end two. It certainly seemed to be the best plan. One by one, as they took out the books, the space behind grew smaller and smaller. There was something in it that was certainly very much alive. Once they caught sight of fingers pressing outward for a way to escape. At last they had it pressed between the two big books. There's muscle there if there isn't flesh and blood, said Saunders as he held them together. Seems to be a right hand enough, too. I suppose this is some sort of infectious hallucination. I've read about such cases before. Infectious fiddlesticks, said Eustace, his face white with anger. Bring the thing downstairs. We'll get it back into the box. It was not altogether easy, but they were successful at last. Drive in the screws, said Eustace. We won't run any risks. Put the box in this old desk of mine. There's nothing in it that I want. Here's the key, thank goodness. There's nothing wrong with the lock. Quite a lively evening, said Saunders. Now let's hear more about your uncle. They sat up together till early morning. Saunders had no desire to sleep. Eustace was trying to explain and forget, to conceal from himself a fear that he had never felt before, the fear of walking alone down the long corridor to his bedroom. Whatever it was, said Eustace to Saunders on the following morning, I propose that we drop the subject. There's nothing to keep us here for the next 10 days. We'll motor up to the lakes and get some climbing. And nobody all day, and see nobody all day, and sit bored to death with each other all night. Not for me, thanks. Why not run up to town? Run's the exact word in this case, isn't it? We're both in such a blessed funk. Pull yourself together, Eustace, and let's have another look at the hand. As you like, said Eustace. There's the key. They went into the library and opened the desk. The box was where they had left it the previous night. What are you waiting for? Asked Eustace. I'm waiting for you to volunteer to open the lid. However, since you seem to funk it, allow me. There doesn't seem to be the likelihood of any rumpus at this morning, at all events. He opened the lid and picked out the hand. Cold? Tepid, a bit below blood heat by the feel. Soft and supple, too. If it's the embalming, it's a sort of embalming I've never seen before. Is it your uncle's hand? Oh, yes, it's his all right, said Eustace. I should know those long, thin fingers anywhere. Put it back in the box, Saunders. Never mind about the screws. I'll lock the desk so that there'll be no chance of its getting out. We'll compromise by motoring up to town for a week. If we get off soon after lunch, we ought to be at Grantham or Stamford by night. Right, said Saunders. And tomorrow, oh, well, by tomorrow we shall have forgotten all about this beastly thing. If when the morrow came they had not forgotten. It was certainly true that by the end of the week they were able to tell a very vivid ghost story at the little supper Eustace gave on Halloween. You don't want to believe that it's true, Mr. Borlsover? How perfectly awful. I'll take my oath on it, and so would Saunders here, wouldn't you, old chap? Any number of oaths, said Saunders. It was a long, thin hand, you know, and it gripped me just like that. Don't, Mr. Saunders, don't. How perfectly horrid. Now tell us another one, do. Oh, a really creepy one, please. Here's a pretty mess, said Eustace on the following day as he threw a letter across the table to Saunders. It's your affair, though. Mrs. Merritt, if I understand, gives a month's notice. Oh, that's quite absurd on Mrs. Merritt's part, Saunders replied. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Let's see what she says. Dear sir, he read, this is to let you know that I must give a month's notice from Tuesday the 13th. For a long time, I felt the place is too big for me, but when Jane Parfitt and Emma Laidlaw go off with scarcely as much as a if you please after frightening the wits out of the other girls so that they can't turn a room out by themselves or walk alone down the stairs for fear of treading on half-frozen toads or hearing it run along the passages at night, all I can say is that it's no place for me. So I must ask you, Mr. Borlsover, sir, to find a new housekeeper that has no objection to large and lonely houses, which some people do say, not that I believe them for a minute, my poor mother, having always been a Wesleyan, are haunted. Yours faithfully, Elizabeth Merritt. P.S. I should be obliged if you would give my respects to Mr. Saunders. I hope that he won't run no risks with his cold. Saunders, said Eustace, you've always had a wonderful way with your dealing in servants. You mustn't let poor old Merritt go. Of course she shan't go, said Saunders. She's probably only angling for a rise in salary. I'll write to her this morning. No, there's nothing like a personal interview. We've had enough of town. We'll go back tomorrow, and you must work your cold for all it's worth. Don't forget that it's got onto the chest and will require weeks of feeding up and nursing. All right, I think I can manage Miss Merritt. But Miss Merritt was more obstinate than he had thought. She was very sorry to hear of Mr. Saunders' cold and how he lay awake at night in London coughing. Very sorry indeed. She'd change his room for him gladly and get the south room aired. And then he wouldn't have a basin of, wouldn't he have a basin of hot bread and milk last thing at night? But she was afraid that she would have to leave at the end of the month. Try her with an increase of salary, was the advice of Eustace. It was no use. Mrs. Merritt was obdurate, though she knew of a Mrs. Handyside who had been southkeeper to Lord Gargrave, who might be glad to come at the salary mentioned. What's the matter with all the servants, Morton? Asked Eustace that evening when he brought their coffee into the library. What's all this about Mrs. Merritt wanting to leave? If you please, sir, I was going to mention it myself. I have a confession to make. When I found your note asking me to open that desk and take out the box with the rat, I broke the lock, as you told me, and was glad to do it, for I could hear the animal in the box making a great noise, and I thought it wanted food. So I took out the box, sir, and got a cage and was going to transfer it when the animal got away. What in the world are you talking about? I never wrote any such note. Excuse me, sir, it was the note that I picked up here on the floor the day you and Mr. Saunders left. I have it in my pocket now. It certainly seemed to be in Eustace's handwriting. It was written in pencil and began somewhat abruptly. Get a hammer, Morton, he read, or some other tool, and break open the lock in the desk in the library. Take out the box that is inside. You need not do anything else. The lid is already open. Eustace Borlsover. And you opened the desk? Yes, sir, and as I was getting the cage ready, the animal hopped out. What animal? The animal inside the box, sir. What did it look like? Well, sir, I couldn't tell you, Morton said nervously. My back was turned, and it was halfway down the room when I looked up. What was its color? Asked Saunders. Black? Oh, no, sir, a grayish white. It crept along in a very funny way. I don't think it had a tail. What did you do then? I tried to catch it, but it was no use, so I set the rat traps and kept the library shut. Then that girl, Emma Laidlaw, left the door open when she was cleaning, and I think it must have escaped. And you think that's the animal that's been frightening the maids? Well, no, sir, not quite. They said it was, you'll excuse me, sir, a hand that they saw. Emma trod on it once at the bottom of the stairs. She thought it was a half-frozen toad, only white. And then Parfitt was washing up the dishes in the scullery. She wasn't thinking about anything in particular. It was close on dusk. She took her hands out of the water and was drying them absent-minded, like on the roller towel, when she found that she was drying someone else's hand as well, only colder than hers. What nonsense! Exclaimed Saunders. Exactly, sir, that's what I told her, but we couldn't get her to stop. You don't believe all this, said Eustace, turning suddenly towards the butler. Me, sir? Oh, no, sir, I've never seen anything. Nor heard anything? Well, sir, if you must know, the bells do ring at odd times, and there's nobody there when we go round to draw the blinds at night. As often as not, somebody's been there before us. But as I says to Mrs. Merritt, a young monkey might do wonderful things, and we all know that Mr. Borlsover has had some strange animals about the place. Very well, Morton, that will do. What do you make of it? Asked Saunders when they were alone. I mean, of the letter you said you wrote. Oh, that's simple enough, said Eustace. See the paper it's written on? I stopped using that years ago, but there were a few odd sheets and envelopes left in the old desk. We never fastened the lid on the box before locking it. The hand got out, found a pencil, and wrote this note and shoved it through a crack onto the floor where Morton found it. That's as plain as daylight. But the hand couldn't write. Couldn't it? You've not seen it do the things I've seen, and he told Saunders more of what had happened at Eastbourne. Well, said Saunders, in that case, we at least have an explanation of the legacy. It was the hand that wrote unknown to your uncle that letter to your solicitor, bequeathing itself to you. Your uncle had no more to do with that request than I. In fact, it would seem that some idea of automatic writing and feared it. He had some idea of the automatic writing and feared it. And if it's not my uncle, what is it? I suppose some people might say that a disembodied spirit had got your uncle to educate and prepare a little body for it. Now it's got into that little body and is off on its own. Well, what are we to do? We'll keep our eyes open, said Saunders, and try to catch it. If we can't do that, we shall have to wait till the bally clockwork runs down. After all, if it's flesh and blood, it can't live forever. For 2 days, nothing happened. Then Saunders saw it sliding down the banister in the hall. He was taken unawares and lost a full second before he started in pursuit, only to find that the thing had escaped him. 3 days later, Eustace, writing alone in the library at night, saw it sitting on an open book at the other end of the room. The fingers crept over the page, feeling the prints as if they were reading. But before he had got up from his seat, it had taken the alarm and was pulling itself up the curtains. Eustace watched it grimly as it hung onto the cornice with 3 fingers, flicking thumb and forefinger at him in an expression of scornful derision. Well, I don't know, she flung. A disembodied hand chasing you around the house. I hope I'm doing okay, guys, and I apologize for the stumbles. Uh-oh. I lost my place. Bear with me just a second. I know what I'll do, he said. If I only get it into the open, I'll set the dogs on it. He spoke to Saunders of the suggestion. It's a jolly good idea, he said. Only we won't wait till we find it out of doors. We'll get the dogs. There are 2 terriers, and the underkeeper's an Irish mongrel that's on to rats like a flash. Your spaniel has not got enough spirit for this game. They brought the dogs into the house, and the keeper's Irish mongrel chewed up his slippers, and the terriers tripped up Morton as he waited at the table, but all 3 were welcome. Even false security is better than no security at all. I'm glad you're enjoying it, Wheelie. Thank you, Joanna. For a fortnight, nothing happened. Then the hand was caught, not by the dogs, but by Mrs. Merritt's gray parrot. The bird was in the habit of periodically removing the pins that kept its seed and water tins in place and of escaping through the holes in the side of the cage. When once at liberty, Peter would show no inclination to return and would often be about the house for days. Now, after 6 consecutive weeks of captivity, Peter had again discovered a new means of unloosening his bolts and was at large, exploring the tapestried forest of the curtains and singing songs in praise of liberty from cornice and picture rail. "It's no use you trying to catch him," said Eustace to Mrs. Merritt as she came into the study one afternoon towards dusk with a stepladder. "You'd much better leave Peter alone. Starve him into surrender, Mrs. Merritt, and don't leave bananas and seed about for him to peck at when he fancies he's hungry. You're far too soft-hearted." "Well, sir, I see he's out of reach now on a picture rail, so if you wouldn't mind closing the door, sir, when you leave the room, I'll bring his cage in tonight and put some meat inside of it. He's fond of meat, and though it does make him pull out his feathers to suck the quills, they do say if you cook—" "Never mind, Mrs. Merritt," said Eustace, who was busy writing. "That will do. I'll keep an eye on the bird." There was silence in the room, unbroken except for the continuous whisper of his pen. "Scratch poor Peter," said the bird. "Scratch poor old Peter." "Be quiet, you beastly bird." "Poor old Peter. Scratch poor Peter, do." "More likely to wring your neck if I get a hold of you." He looked up at the picture rail, and there was the hand holding on to a hook with 3 fingers and slowly scratching the head of the parrot with a 4th. Eustace ran to the bell and pressed it hard, then across to the window, which he closed with a bang. Frightened by the noise, the parrot shook its wings preparatory for flight, and as it did so, the fingers of the hand got hold of it by the throat. There was a shrill scream from Peter as he fluttered across the room, wheeling in circles that ever descended, borne down under the weight that clung to him. The bird dropped at last quite suddenly, and Eustace saw fingers and feathers rolled into an inextricable mass on the floor. The struggle abruptly ceased as finger and thumb squeezed the neck. The bird's eyes rolled up to show the whites, and there was a faint, half-choked gurgle. But before the fingers had time to loose their hold, Eustace had them in his own. "Send Mr. Saunders here at once," he said to the maid who came in to the bell. "Tell him I want him immediately." Then he went with a hand to the fire. There was a ragged gash across the back where the bird's beak had torn it, but no blood oozed from the wound. He noticed with disgust that the nails had grown long and discolored. "I'll burn the beastly thing," he said, but he could not burn it. He tried to throw it into the flames, but his own hands, as if restrained by some old primitive feeling, would not let him. And so Saunders found him pale and irresolute, with a hand still clasped tightly in his fingers. "I've got it at last," he said in a tone of triumph. "Good. Let's have a look at it." "Not when it's loose. Get me some nails and a hammer and a board of some sort." "Can you hold it all right?" "Yes, the thing's quite limp. Tired out with throttling poor old Peter, I should say." "Now," said Saunders when he returned with the things, "what are we going to do?" "Drive a nail through it first so that it can't get away. Then we can take our time over examining it." "Do it yourself," said Saunders. "I don't mind helping you with guinea pigs occasionally when there's something to be learned, partly because I don't fear guinea pigs' revenge. This thing's different." "All right, you miserable skunk. I won't forget the way you've stood by me." He took up a nail, and before Saunders had realized what he was doing, had driven it through the hand deep into the board. "Oh, my aunt!" he giggled hysterically. "Look at it now!" For the hand was writhing in agonized contortions, squirming and wriggling upon the nail like a worm upon the hook. "Well," said Saunders, "you've done it now. I'll leave you to examine it." "Don't go! In heaven's name! Cover it up, man! Cover it up! Shove a cloth over it! Here!" He pulled the anti-masker from the back of the chair, and wrapped the board in it. "Now get the keys from my pocket and open the safe. Chuck the other things out. Oh, Lord, it's getting itself into frightful knots. Open it quick." He threw the thing in and banged the door. "We'll keep it there till it dies," he said. "May I burn in hell if I ever open the door of that safe again." Mrs. Merritt departed at the end of the month. Her successor was certainly more successful in the management of the servants. Early in her rule, she declared that she would stand no nonsense, and gossip soon withered and died. Eustace Borlsover went back to his old way of life. Old habits crept in and covered his new experience. He was, if anything, less morose and showed a greater inclination to take his natural part in country society. "I shouldn't be surprised if he marries one of these days," said Saunders. "Well, I'm in no hurry for such an event. I know Eustace far too well for the future Mrs. Borlsover to like me. It will be the same old story again, a long friendship slowly made, marriage, and a long friendship quickly forgotten." But Eustace Borlsover did not follow the advice of his uncle and Mary. He was too fond of old slippers and tobacco. The cooking, too, under Mrs. Handyside's management was excellent, and she seemed, too, to have a heaven-sent faculty in knowing when to stop dusting. Little by little, the old life resumed its old power. Then came the burglary. The men, it was said, broke into the house by way of the conservatory. It was really little more than an attempt, for they only succeeded in carrying away a few pieces of plate from the pantry. The safe in the study was certainly found open and empty, but Mr. Borlsover informed the police it had kept nothing of value in it during the last 6 months. "Then you're lucky in getting off so easy, sir. By the way they had gone about their business, I should say they were experienced cracksmen. They must have caught alarms when they were just beginning the evening's work." "Yes, I suppose I'm lucky." "Yes, I'm expanding everyone's vocabulary tonight, David." 140 people have tuned in. Thank you so much. By the way, we do have one more story after this. Which I have never read before. I've read these two before, so. "I have no doubt," said the inspector, "that we shall be able to trace the men. I have said that they must have been old hands at the game. The way they got in and opened the safe shows that. But there's one thing that puzzles me. One of them was careless enough not to wear gloves, and I'm bothered if I know what he was trying to do. I've traced his finger marks on the new varnish on the window sashes in every one of the downstairs rooms. They are a very distinct one, too." "Right hand, left hand, or both?" asked Eustace. "Oh, right hand every time. That's the funny thing. He must have been a foolhardy fellow, and I rather think it was him that wrote that." He took a slip of paper from his pocket. "That's what he wrote, sir. 'I've got out, Eustace Borlsover, but I'll be back before long.' Some gale bird just escaped, I suppose. It'll make it all the easier for us to trace him. Do you know the writing, sir?" "No," said Eustace. "It's not the writing of anyone I know." "I'm not going to stay here any longer," said Eustace to Saunders at luncheon. "I've got on far better during this last 6 months than I ever expected, but I'm not going to run the risk of seeing that thing again. I shall go up to town this afternoon, get Morton to put my things together, and join me with the car at Brighton on the day after tomorrow, and bring the proofs of those 2 papers with you. We'll run over them together." "How long are you going to be away?" "I can't say for certain, but be prepared to stay for some time. We've stuck to work pretty closely through the summer, and I, for one, need a holiday. I'll engage the rooms at Brighton. You best break it to the journey. You'll find it best to break the journey at Hitchin. I'll wire to you there at the Crown to tell you the Brighton address." The house he chose at Brighton was in a terrace. He had been there before. It was kept by his old college friend, a man of discreet silence, who was admirably partnered by an excellent cook. The rooms were on the first floor. The 2 bedrooms were at the back and opened out of each other. "Saunders can have the smaller one, though it is only the only one with the fireplace," he said. "I'll stick to the larger of the 2 since it's got a bathroom adjoining. I wonder what time he'll arrive with the car." Saunders came about 7, cold and cross and dirty. "We'll light the fire in the dining room." Sorry, that was Eustace. "We'll light the fire in the dining room and get Prince to unpack some of the things while we are at dinner. What were the roads like?" "Rotten, swimming with mud and a beastly cold wind against us all day. And this is July. Dear old England." "Yes," said Eustace. "I think we might do worse than leave dear old England for a few months." They turned in soon after 12. "You oughtn't feel cold, Saunders," said Eustace, "when you can afford to sport a great cat-skin lined coat like this. You do yourself very well, all things considered. Look at those gloves, for instance. Who could possibly feel cold wearing them?" "They are far too clumsy for driving. Try them on and see." And he tossed them through the door onto Eustace's bed and went on unpacking. A minute later, he heard a shrill cry of terror. "Oh, Lord!" he heard. "It's in the glove! Quick, Saunders, quick!" Then came a smacking thud. Eustace had thrown it from him. "I've chucked it into your bathroom, and it's hit the wall and fallen in the bath. Come now, if you want to help." Saunders, with a lighted candle in his hand, looked over the edge of the bath. There it was, old and maimed, dumb and blind, with a ragged hole in the middle, crawling, staggering, trying to creep up the slippery sides only to fall back helpless. "Stay there," said Saunders. I'll empty a collar box or something and we'll jam it in. It can't get out while I'm away. Yes, it can, shouted Eustace. It's getting out now. It's climbing up the plug chain. No, you brute, you filthy brute. You don't come back. Saunders, it's getting away from me. I can't hold it. It's all slippery. Curse its claws. Shut the window, you idiot. The top, too, as well as the bottom. You utter idiot. It's got out. There was a sound of something dropping to the hard flagstones below, and Eustace fell back fainting. For a fortnight, he was ill. I don't know what to make of it, the doctor said to Saunders. I can only suppose that Mr. Borlsover has suffered some great emotional shock. You had better let me send someone to help you nurse him, and by all means indulge that whim of his never to be left alone in the dark. I would like to keep a light burning all night if I were you, but he must have more fresh air. It's perfectly absurd, this hatred of open windows. Eustace, however, had no one with him but Saunders. I don't want the other men, he said. They'd smuggle it in somehow. I know they would. Don't worry about it, old chap. This sort of thing can't go on indefinitely. You know, I saw it this time as well as you. It wasn't half so active. It won't go on living much longer, especially after that fall. I heard it hit the flags myself. As soon as you're a bit stronger, we'll leave this place, not bag and baggage, but with only with the clothes on our backs, so that it won't be able to hide anywhere. We'll escape it that way. We won't give any address, and we won't have any parcels sent to us after. Cheer up, Eustace. You'll be well enough to leave in a day or two. The doctor says I can take you out in a chair tomorrow. What have I done? Asked Eustace. Why does it come after me? I'm no worse than other men. I'm no worse than you, Saunders. You know I'm not. It was you who were at the bottom of that dirty business in San Diego, and that was 15 years ago. It's not that, of course. We're in the 20th century. Even the parsons have dropped the idea of your old sins fading you out. Before you caught that hand in the library, it was filled with pure malevolence to you and all mankind. After you spiked it through with a nail, it naturally forgot about the other people and concentrated its attention on you. It was shut up in that safe, you know, for nearly 6 months. That gives it plenty of time to think of revenge. Eustace Borlsover would not leave his room, but he thought that there might be something in Saunders' suggestion to leave Brighton without notice. He began rapidly to regain his strength. We'll go on the 1st of September, he said. The evening of August 31st was oppressively warm. Though at midday the windows had been wide open, they had been shut for an hour or so before dusk. Mrs. Prince had long since ceased to wonder at the strange habits of the gentlemen on the first floor. Soon after their arrival, she had been told to take down the heavy window curtains in the 2 bedrooms, and day by day the rooms had seemed to grow more bare. Nothing was left lying about. Mr. Borlsover doesn't like to have any place where dirt can collect, Saunders had said in an excuse. He likes to see in all the corners of the room. Couldn't I open the window just a little? He said to Eustace that evening. We're simply roasting in here, you know. No, leave well enough alone. We're not a couple of boarding school misses fresh from a course of hygiene lectures. Get the chessboard out. They sat down and played. At 10 o'clock, Mrs. Prince came to the door with a note. I am sorry I didn't bring it before, but it was left in the letter box. Open it, Saunders, and see if it wants answering. It was very brief. There was neither an address nor a signature. Will 11 o'clock tonight be suitable for our last appointment? Who is it from? Asked Borlsover. It was meant for me, said Saunders. There's no answer, Mrs. Prince, and he put the paper into his pocket. A dunning letter from a tailor. I suppose he must have got wind of our leaving. It was a clever lie, and Eustace asked no more questions. They went on with their game. On the landing outside, Saunders could hear the grandfather clock whispering the seconds, blurting out the quarter hours. Check, said Eustace. The clock struck 11. At the same time, there was a gentle knocking on the door. It seemed to come from the bottom panel. Who's there? Asked Eustace. There was no answer. Mrs. Prince, is that you? She is up above, said Saunders. I can hear her walking about the room. Then lock the door, bolt it too. Your move, Saunders. While Saunders sat with his eyes on the chessboard, Eustace walked over to the window and examined the fastenings. He did the same in Saunders' room and the bathroom. There were no doors between the three rooms, or he would have shut up and locked them too. Now, Saunders, he said, don't stay all night over your move. I've had time to smoke one cigarette already. It's bad to keep an invalid waiting. There's only one possible thing for you to do. What was that? The ivy was blowing against the window. There, it's your move now, Eustace. It wasn't the ivy, you idiot. It was someone tapping on the window. And he pulled up the blind. On the outer side of the window, clinging to the sash, was the hand. What's that it's holding? It's a pocket knife. It's going to try and open the window by pushing back the fastener with a blade. Well, let it try. Those fasteners screw down. They can't be opened that way. Anyhow, we'll close the shutters. It's your move. I played. Saunders found it impossible to fix his attention on the game. He could not understand Eustace, who seemed all at once to have lost his fear. What do you say to some wine? He asked. You seem to be taking... What do you say to some wine? He asked. You seem to be taking things coolly, but I don't want your mind confessing that I'm in a blessed funk. You've no need to be. There's nothing supernatural about that hand, Saunders. I mean, it seems to be governed by the laws of time and space. It's not the sort of thing that vanishes into thin air or slides through oaken doors. And since that's so, I defy it to get in here. We'll leave the place in the morning. I, for one, have bottomed the depths of fear. Fill your glass, man. The windows are all shuttered. The door is locked and bolted. Pledge me my Uncle Adrian. Drink, man. What are you waiting for? Saunders was standing with his half glass raised. It can get in, he said hoarsely. It can get in. We've forgotten. There's a fireplace in my bedroom. It will come down the chimney. Quick, said Eustace as he rushed into the other room. We haven't got a minute to lose. What can we do? Light the fire, Saunders. Give me a match, quick. They must all be in the other room. I'll get them. Hurry, man, for goodness sake. Look in the bookcase. Look in the bathroom. Here, come and stand here. I'll look. Be quick, shouted Saunders. I can hear something. Then plug a sheet from your bed up the chimney. No, here's a match. He had found one that had slipped into a crack in the floor. Is a fire laid? Good, but it may not burn. I know. Oil from that old reading lamp and this cotton wool. Now the match, quick. Pull the sheet away, you fool. We don't want it in now. There was a great roar from the grate as a flame shot up. Saunders had been a fraction of a second too late with the sheet. The oil had fallen on it. It, too, was burning. The whole place will be on fire, cried Eustace as he tried to beat out the flames with a blanket. It's no good. I can't manage it. You must open the door, Saunders, and get help. Saunders ran to the door and fumbled with the bolts. The key was stiff in the lock. Hurry, shouted Eustace. The whole place is ablaze. After the key turned in the lock at last. For a half a second, Saunders stepped back to look. He could never quite be sure later what he had seen, but at the time he thought something black and charred was creeping slowly, very slowly, from the mass of flames towards Eustace Borlsover. For a moment he thought of returning to his friend, but the noise and smell of the burning sent him running down the passage, crying, Fire! Fire! He rushed to the telephone to summon help, and then back to the bathroom. He should have thought of that before, for water. As he burst open the bathroom door, there came a scream of terror, which ended suddenly, and then the sound of a heavy fall. And that is The Beast with Five Fingers. It got Eustace. At least that's my take on it. Sorry I slipped and stumbled on some stuff there before, guys. Let me scroll back up. 33K7, 8 out of 10. Severed hand attacked him. Happy Halloween to you, Alan. Yes, anti-massacre. Had to look that one up. A protective and often decorative covering for the back or arms of a chair or sofa. Why didn't they get a mallet? Well, you know, it's old horror stories. I mean, why didn't they burn it up that first night? That should have been the end of it. Yeah. I think that's a different one, Daniel. I think that's a different one. She Flung, you loved it. I hope it was nice and creepy. I think we have time for one more this Halloween Eve. It's a relatively short one. I'll drop the link to you guys. It is much shorter than I would say it's probably about the same length as August Heat, but I haven't done a word count on it. There's the link. And here's the story. This is titled Graveyard Dogs. Thank you, Joanna. This is Graveyard Dogs. This is by David Brown. I just hope my reading on these was good. And yes, I am fishing for compliments. I hope you guys liked it, because if I did a bad job, I won't do this again. I don't mean in that, oh, I'm never gonna try it again. I just mean, it won't be a good thing to do. All right. So here we go. Now, I have never read this one before, so if there's anything incredibly inappropriate in it, I apologize. The howling of the wind through the sepulchre's vault doors had fused with the yowling of the grave robber's fretful hound. The gaunt, short-haired mutt was chained to the rear bumper of a rusted Ford Model T pickup truck. The unsightly vehicle appeared to be made entirely of rust, only being held together by its weathered wooden box bed. It was just after midnight, and the thunderstorm outside had come on unusually fast. The old crooked filcher paused at his labor and looked out through the mausoleum's open iron doors. Lightning flashed in the clouds and illuminated the lonely headstones in front and beyond his truck, which was parked on an unpaved road about 20 yards away. His dog yapped repeatedly from his muddy shelter under the truck's flatbed. "Damn it, dog, you're going to bring around the caretaker," the man yelled at the mutt he had simply named Dog. The dog didn't let up, and neither did the rain. It started coming down in sheets. "Blast it all to hell, good for nothing cur," the man cursed. He looked at what he still had left to do. One of 4 stone caskets had been pried open, with its lid leaned up against its side. It contained the remains of a man, and the only things he managed to pilfer were a tarnished silver watch and a thin gold wedding band. This was supposed to have been the tomb of a wealthy robber baron, but the head of the household certainly hadn't taken much with him. The tomb raider had been working on the second large sarcophagus when Dog had started up with his caterwauling. Additionally, there was a pair of smaller coffins remaining to be opened, situated between the larger set, perhaps containing the bodies of young children. He set down his crowbar and hammer on the sarcophagus cover and picked up his lantern off the floor. Looking outside at the pouring rain, he thought better of it and left his light source behind. He covered his head with his trench coat and cursed his way down to the truck to retrieve his dog. "If this don't beat all, the storm might give me some time to get the cotton picking job done without anyone noticing, that is, if I could just get Dog to shut up." He raised his voice on the last word as he reached his Ford. Dog whimpered in the mire under the truck. The dog's coarse master disconnected the leash from the bumper and yanked him out from under the truck with a jerk of the chain. "Get out of there, damn dog. Come on, you stupid beast," he bellowed as he dragged the animal up the hill towards the open vault with 4 Greek Doric columns. Dog struggled at first, but once the rain started to soak his fur, he timidly followed his master into the crypt with his head and tail down. They both shook off the rain, and the burglar hitched the end of the dog's chain to a wrought iron cross mounted on the far wall behind the coffins. "There, that'll hold you. Now shut up and go to sleep. We may have to hole up in here till this tempest lets up." The thief returned to his tasks, and after about 30 minutes, he had the second sarcophagus unsealed using his crowbar. He pushed the cover off with a grunt, and it hit the polished stone floor with a loud boom that blended well with an even louder thunderclap. Dog sneezed and cowered in the vault's wall. When he caught a whiff of embalmed flesh stretched over brittle bones, the man salvaged only a handful of valuables from the coffin. 2 silver earrings, tiny diamond wedding ring, and... He paused and opened the catch on a plain silver locket. It revealed only two black and white pictures of Doberman pinschers. Engraved beneath one image was the name Nero, and atop the other was the name Ivan. He threw the necklace against the wall and sighed in frustration. And a useless trinket, hellfire and damnation. Outside, the storm was still raging. Upon breaking into the vault, he never intended to open the smaller coffins, but since his hunt had proven so fruitless, he decided to defile the children's graves too. Fervently, he began hammering the seals around the tops of the two coffins with his hammer. Using his crowbar, he jimmied open the first one and immediately turned and pried off the second lid. The exposed caskets did not contain children at all, but instead they held the dry bones of two large dogs. Well, well, hello, Nero, hello, Ivan. The man greeted him sarcastically, but his heart nearly stopped when he saw the dog's gem-encrusted collars. One had rubies intermixed with diamonds, and the other had sapphires commingled with emeralds. Faster than a dog running to his vomit, the pair of chokers were off the mummified pet's skeletal necks and in the man's pocket. He felt a sudden urge to flee, but the trees outside were now blowing horizontally, and several had lost sizable limbs. The strenuous work of the past hour or so had finally caught up with the not-so-young man, and he sat down next to Dog for a brief rest. Not only was he tired, but he was hungry too. Remembering the half-eaten chocolate bar in his pocket, he pulled it out and nearly finished it in 2 bites. He heard the dog whine, so he selfishly popped the final bite into his mouth, crumpled the paper, and threw it at Dog's face. Find your own victuals, you mangy mutt. Oh, that's right, you're chained up. How inconsiderate of me, he said with faux sympathy. The man got up and tugged a loose rib bone from one of the dead pinschers and tossed it back at Dog. Here you go, bon appetit. Dog snubbed his nose at the offering and rested his head on his paws. The grave robber chuckled at the weather, checked the weather again, and sat back down when he saw that it hadn't gotten any better. For a while, he fingered the collars in his pocket, imagining the small fortune he would gain the next time he visited his favorite pawn shop. That rich bitch must have really loved her pooches, he thought. Eventually, he dozed off into a fitful sleep while rolling thunder permeated the cemetery night. He woke to the sound of low guttural growling. Dog was agitated, and his first thought was that perhaps the caretaker had caught him. However, the wind outside had not subsided in the least. He looked to where Dog was focused, and he prayed to heaven that he was still sleeping, and he was still experiencing a dream, for rising from the 2 small sarcophagi were the decimated, rotten, and now animated twin corpses of Nero and Ivan. The thief was paralyzed with fear and didn't even think of trying to reach for his hammer or crowbar that had been so carelessly discarded. The 2 undead Dobermans snarled as they approached him, and then his lantern burned itself out. It instantly became darker, but not completely black. Sheet lightning flickered through the vault's open doors, but stranger still, the approaching canines were engulfed in a fiery red luminosity. The man had seen Dog battle a coon one time, and it wasn't pretty, but instead of attacking the potential threat, Dog simply moved closer with his head down in submission. Stupid mongrel, the thief whispered his insult because he didn't want to draw the hellhound's attention. He briefly thought about making an attempt to escape, but he'd never make it to the truck before the dogs would have him on the ground. For the next several minutes, the man watched as all 3 dogs barked and bayed in some sort of preternatural macabre ritual. In unison, they would bow their heads and swap positions before raising their snouts to the sky with blood-curdling howls. How many times they repeated this was unsure, but as they performed the demonic dance, he witnessed them slowly merge into one creature that was several times the sum of the dog's sizes with 3 heads. The black triple-headed wolf stopped swaying. 3 tongues drooled through 3 sets of fangs, and the creature focused all 6 of its yellow eyes squarely upon the grave robber. Cerberus roared a single word with 3 hungry voices. Dog! The monster's shout coincided with the deafening boom, and the man awoke in utter blackness. Now he was sure he was truly awake, and he was equally certain he had experienced a vivid nightmare. He guessed his lantern had gone out, but wondered, why are there no shadows? It was then that he realized the loud boom had actually been the sound of the crypt's doors being closed. He was trapped. He crawled on all 4s towards the vault's entrance and heard the distinctive crank of his Ford pickup truck starting. He tried to cry out, "The damn caretaker is stealing my truck," but he failed to utter anything intelligible. It just came out as, "Rah, rah." He leapt towards the doors and was nearly strangled by the chain that was clamped around his neck. He tried to grasp his throat, but his hands wouldn't obey his brain. The odors of the open tombs in the sealed sepulchre suddenly overcame him, and he curled up into a ball on the cold, hard, polished stone floor. His stomach growled, and he saw a dog's tail. Suddenly it dawned on him. The caretaker hadn't stolen his car. Dog had stolen it. Not only that, dog had stolen his body and left him chained and imprisoned, not just entombed inside the stone sepulchre, but confined inside the very body of his own wretched hound. The grave robber could only whimper like a sniveling dog when he heard his truck's last backfire, and the silence of the graveyard engulfed him. It's a nice little tale of canine revenge there from David Brown. So I hope you guys enjoyed that one. That was a pretty good one. So, that is our stories for this All Hallows Eve. I really, really hope you guys enjoyed the first two. The William Fryer Harvey stories I thought were appropriately creepy. I'm rather more fond of August Heat. It's got that immediacy. Although I think the the Beast with Five Fingers could have been as good as August Heat. I think we linger on the back and forth of fighting with it. They're like, oh, we're fighting a possessed demon hand that crawls around. I think if he had shortened it, we probably could have gotten something a bit more akin to August Heat's punchier work, but I still like it. I would say August Heat is probably an 8 out of 10, and the Beast with Five Fingers is probably closer to a 6.5 out of 10. Oh, you're quite welcome, David. And Graveyard Dogs was a nice had a nice Twilight Zone-y feel to it. I quite liked that. And I apologize for getting a little tongue-tied. Again, I am not, I mean, you guys have been here when I've done deep dives on D&D books before. You know, I trip over my tongue. But I appreciate it, and I appreciate you guys being here. We had 157 folks watched tonight, 145 through Twitter, which I know they're not all there right now. I know the Twitter watchers are not by necessity everyone there. But I do appreciate the I do appreciate the watching and the subscribing. So if you haven't already, please do click the subscribe button, click the bell icon for notifications. That would be super duper helpful. There is 1 hour and 20 minutes left of Halloween. So if you want to get your spooky on, now's the time to do it, because starting tomorrow, we get into the Holly Jolly season. Cold reading is harder than people think. I guess so. No one ever took James Randi up on his challenge to prove that they could do it. If you know what that is, you got it. You are quite welcome, 33K7. I quite enjoyed reading the stories. If you guys would like me to do this next Halloween, let me know. If you don't want me to do it ever again at all, let me know. Yes, we can't forget the turkey. I just figured he was an old-timey, redneck, turn of the century redneck. But I think that's going to just about do it for me tonight. My voice is kind of worn out. I will see you all tomorrow night. We are going to be playing some Gamma World. We are back to Gamma World now that the spooky season is over. We might do, maybe maybe she flung, possibly, could be. I'm glad you liked it. But yeah, we will be back tomorrow for Gamma World, and of course, I will bring you guys any news that pops up that I think is relevant. I've kind of held off on the train wreck from a serious RPGer standpoint that 6th edition is turning out to be. But if you guys want news stories about that, I can do news stories about that. So thank you all for being here tonight. Seriously, it means a lot that you guys hung out with me tonight. Thank you, Kabuki, Wheeling Dragon. Oh my gosh. 33K7, Paint Minis Live, David Brown, She Left, Daniel Rowan, FMCS Recon, Joanna Shipley, of course. Thank you very much. I'm Not Your Echo is dressed up as a Dwarven magic user. Truly a horrifying costume. So we'll be back tomorrow. So I wish you guys the best of evenings. Good luck getting your stuff from the Great Pumpkin. I hope you were all sitting in a real sincere pumpkin patch. And wherever you go and whatever you do, if you're doing a little late night trick-or-treating, be careful. That guy in an owl bear costume, he might not be pretending. Oh, and thank you very much. Well, maybe a little one, but thank you for the super wave. You guys have a lovely evening. I'll talk to you later.
Have you seen my owl bear? Here's to all the weirdos everywhere in the woods and in the air. Have you seen my owl bear? Should I shave off all my hair? Bobs are all around. Some live in tunnels underground. Some are fat, some are rich, some are sleeping in a ditch. Can you ride a crooked horse without a saddle way off course? Naked as a toad all the way to Smoky Joe's. Have you seen the little creep driving fast in his little green Jeep? He smells like fish and brandy, but his rotten teeth look dandy. Take me to the show, I don't care if fast or slow. From action flicks to dancing dicks, just take me to the show.